Hello, everybody, and welcome to Commodity Culture, where we break down the commodity space for both new and experienced investors. My name's Jesse Day. As always, nothing here is investing advice. Do your own due diligence. And today's guest is the CEO of Monumental Minerals, a company focused on exploration and development of lithium brine and rare earths. It's Dr. Jamil Sader. Great to have you on the show.
Hi, Jesse. Thanks for having me on today. It's great to be here.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on the show. Looking forward to diving into lithium and rare earth. But before we do, I would like to start like I do with all new guests, and that's with the origin story. So how did you discover the lithium and rare earth space, and how did that lead you to becoming the CEO of Monumental Minerals?
Well, that's a great question, Jesse. So this company was built from a shell, and that was by Max Sally. He's built several companies in the past. One is another rare earth company called Defense Metals, and another one called New Placer Dome, which was a gold company in Nevada. And so this was built from a shell. And then the first project that came in was the Gemi Heavy or Rare Earth project, and that was an option agreement from Discovery Silver. And it's kind of an interesting story. So Discovery Silver, obviously they're looking for silver, precious metals, and some base metals, which there are quite a few deposits in the area of northern Coahuila State in Mexico, where this project lies. And they found this pink mineral called rhodochrosite, and it's generally indicative of precious minerals or mineralization. But they actually had it wrong. It wasn't. It looked the same, but it was actually something called eudialyte, which is a rare earth bearing mineral. So after they sort of realized this, they said, okay, well, there's something here that might be interesting, but it's not really in our wheelhouse. It's not what we do. So then they decided to option that out to us, and it's a very friendly, very favorable deal. So it's a $2 million spend, and then over 2 years with a 500,000 cash or shares at the end of that. So I came in as a director shortly after that project was acquired, and I came in as a director. And then lithium, the lithium project, so Laguna Blanca, came in April, and that came in from Lithium Chile. And that was an option agreement with Lithium Chile. And it kind of really was, we were looking at it and looking at the ramp up in lithium demand and lithium spot price. And that's about the time that I took on the position of CEO. And since that time, we've added another project to our portfolio. It's also another option agreement with called Salar de Turi, and that's with Lithium Chile as well. They're a very strong partner. We had good synergies with them. And it was very easy to take on another project. So, they have a lot to work on, a lot of concessions, and they can't do it all at the same time. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how Monumental came to be.
Great. Well, before we dive into the macro for lithium, rare earths, and the company, I want to address the elephant in the room, and that is Chile, where Monumental Minerals is operating. So Chilean President Gabriel Boric appeared in a televised address to the nation on April 20th, explaining proposed changes to the lithium mining law in Chile via a national lithium strategy and national lithium mining company. So obviously this has spooked a lot of investors away from the region. Maybe you could shed some light on this for us. Is this the end game for lithium mining in Chile, or is this being blown out of proportion? And do you have any updates on what has happened since the president's announcement?
Absolutely. And, Jesse, I won't lie. This proposed national lithium strategy or company, it hasn't been great for Monumental's share price, or any other lithium company that's operating or looking for lithium in Chile. Investor sentiment is rather poor. Investors really feel that Chile will be taking projects from companies, or there'll be forced sales of projects. But we know that this isn't going to happen. This is not the case. And they can't happen. Mining companies and foreign investment are protected by Chilean law and international treaties. And in fact, there's actually a free trade agreement between Canada and Chile. So, but so overall, I think that the country and the government has realized that they need a better strategy, which is not a bad thing for lithium. But the way it's been explained to the public by everyone from President Boric and down hasn't been optimal, to say the least. And the way that it's been construed by many news outlets has been that Chile is nationalizing lithium, which it actually has been a national metal since 1979. But it's created a lot of fear, and it's created a lot of uncertainty among many people. And it's just, honestly, right now it's muddied the water a little bit on lithium in Chile. But the end game is really, Chile really wants to do a few things. They want to clarify, a lithium roadmap for mining. They want to determine an avenue so the state can take advantage of these high prices, and they also want to facilitate exploration and production, which again is great and very amicable goals to have. Because they realize that this lithium boom that we're in right now and these high prices, they're not going to last forever. Eventually, we're going to have a lot of mines that have come online, and prices, and demand and supply will sort of even out. But the way that they've kind of gone ahead with this has not been great, not been optimal. And there's just the way that they presented it, that there's just so much uncertainty. And they've just complicated things. So, I believe that lithium will do well in Chile, and will, it's the number one, it has the highest known reserves of lithium in the world. But it's the number two producer, and it's falling. And so they know that they need to do better. They know that they need to have a strategy, because they can't get things moving. They just need to do it better and roll it out better.
So this announcement seems to have been misunderstood, that Chile is just going to nationalize lithium mining and take it over, and like you said, take assets out of the hands of independent companies there. Obviously not the case. So if we look on the flip side, then what are the advantages of operating in Chile as a jurisdiction?
Well, I love Chile. I mean, I've been traveling to Chile. I've been working in Chile almost my entire professional career. It's safe. City of Santiago is probably safer than a lot of American cities. It's very much a country of rule of law, and so it's very different from a lot of the other Latin American countries, where there is actually quite low incidences of corruption, which can be rather unusual in South America sometimes. And it does have very mining friendly policies. I mean, it produces 23% of the world's copper. They know where their paychecks come from. And, with the exception of some of the recent issues surrounding lithium, it is very friendly towards mining. It has a Western mindset compared to a lot of other Latin American countries. The free trade agreement with Canada, which I mentioned, and lastly, and I think it's important to mention this, is that compared to its neighbor Argentina, it's very easy to get money in and out of the country. Whereas in Argentina, that can be quite a difficult feat. And there's some, if you look it up, it's called blue chip swaps. It's this kind of roundabout sort of way to get your money out.
Right, very good points. And yes, I've heard that about getting capital out of Argentina. So good to know the situation is different in Chile. So let's focus on the macro for lithium now, because it's been a very hot commodity over the past few years. We're continuing to see interest build among both the retail side and institutional investors. Could you outline the main tailwinds you currently see operating in lithium's favor?
I just think it's a math question, and for me, the math doesn't lie. So, I'll just use Albemarle's forecast as an example. Right now, what they see is that by 2025, the global population will use 1.8 million tons of LCE, and by 2030, that number goes up to 3.7 million tons of LCE that is going to be required. And just to put that into perspective, in 2022, the world used 600,000 tons of LCE. So it's a huge ramp up in the amount of lithium that's required. And this is mainly for EVs. And that move away from LCE vehicles towards EVs. So, if you look at just the EV space, which is the biggest contributor or the biggest consumer, I should say, of lithium right now, in Europe, China, and the U.S., the amount of EVs that have been sold, I guess, last year in 2022 was 19%, 18%, and 8% respectively. And so this could be full EVs or plug-in hybrids or something with a battery, something with a lithium battery. But by 2030, that's projected to be 70% in Europe, 49% of vehicles in China, and 47% of vehicles in the US. That's a huge increase over a very short period. And then the question remains is like, well, where are you going to get this lithium? So new supply will come online, and there's a lot of people out there that are looking for lithium, whether it's in Canada, in Australia, Chile, wherever. There's a lot of people looking right now, but it takes time to go from from exploration phase to production phase. And so in that time frame, that's where lithium is still going to be, there's going to be more demand and not enough supply and probably sustained high prices.
Well, speaking of supply, could you talk to us about the supply chain for lithium at the moment? I know a lot of the lithium supply, and especially the processing, comes out of China. Is that accurate, and how important is it for the world to diversify our lithium supply globally?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, China's definitely a big player, but they only have about 7% of the world's lithium reserves. So I think they're number 4 after, I think it goes Australia, Chile, Argentina, and then China. I think that's the order. But China imports 70% of the lithium that's produced globally. So 7% reserves, but they import 70%, which is a lot. And, up until 2015, it was South Korea, and Japan that were the top producers of lithium-ion batteries. But China's been looking at this for a long time. They've kind of known for a long time that electrification is the way to go, and perhaps that's out of necessity. I mean, if any of your viewers have been to Beijing, the air quality is pretty horrible, and so they know that they need to do something different because that type of environment is not healthy for their population. So they've been really pushed to move to electrification. But, and they have been excellent at developing technology, manufacturing, supply chain, and also kind of nurturing and developing companies that can go around the world, like BYD or Ganfeng, that can go around the world and pick up assets to supply that manufacturing and supply chain. So they've done a really good job of this. But the issue here is that there's a lot of political issues between China and Western countries. Like spy balloons or whatever you want to pick your pick, right? And so there are a lot of pushbacks by Western governments and to develop their own supply chain or their own manufacturing. And just to give you an example, the U.S. government gave a company called Ioneer $700 million loan to develop their project in the Western U.S. And then in Canada, here in Ontario, the government just recently provided Volkswagen $13 billion in subsidies to build a battery plant in southern Ontario. So there is definitely a push but China is definitely the big boy in the room for sure.
So, Monumental Minerals is exploring and developing lithium brine. Could you explain exactly what that is and give us an overview of the different kinds of lithium for those who may be new to the sector?
So okay, so brines they only occur in a pretty unique environment. So you need to have some pretty unusual situations that all kind of come together. And so you see it in the lithium triangle. You see it a little bit in the southwestern U.S. and perhaps in Tibet. And there's not really many other places globally that you see that. So the ingredients you need to have an arid climate. You need to have volcanic rocks, especially something called ignimbrites, which are just layers of volcanic ash. And you need to have a closed basin. And so by that, I mean you need to have something where the water and the groundwater is flowing in somewhere, but it never actually flows into the ocean. That water just stays there and evaporates or and never actually goes anywhere. So all the salts that are stripped out of the rock, these ignimbrites or these volcanic ash, all those salts that are stripped out by the groundwater, they come into this basin, and then the water gets evaporated very quickly, and then just over time, that water becomes more and more concentrated in metals like lithium, could be boron, it could be calcium, magnesium, potassium, all these different things. I won't get into too much about oil field brines. Those are a little bit different. They're kind of a waste product of oil extraction. But for your typical brines, your range of concentrations are between 200 milligrams per liter and about on the high end about 1,500 milligrams per liter. And the nice thing about the brines is that I always say that Mother Nature has done half your work for you. So Mother Nature has already stripped the lithium out and concentrated it in a liquid. So all you need to do is get it out of that liquid. Pegmatites, those are found in many different types of terrains in many different parts of the world. They're a lot more common than brines. So it's basically hard rock lithium. And the key minerals are spodumene, petalite, and lepidolite. And these, they generally form through ancient continental plate collisions, so plates colliding and building mountains, and that's generally where you see these. So, but over the last, I don't know, let's say 2 billion years of Earth's history, they're in quite a few different places. And you'll generally see somewhere between 1 to 3% of lithium oxide. It's a bit different because for these type of deposits, you will report as an oxide rather than just as lithium as an element. And the third big one is clay, and clays are typically where you've got an ancient kind of lake bed or sedimentary units where you've had hot waters that have been cycled through, and they've done the work. Mother Nature has done the work of stripping that lithium out of the rock, but then depositing it in clays. So because there wasn't enough water, or the water all drained out. And so you do need the same thing. You still need the lithium rich magmas. You need the volcanic ash. So you need the similar types of geological setting as the brines, but they tend to be, as I said, the water has been sort of drained out and just left the lithium in the clays, and they're a little bit more tricky to mine at the moment. The production is more difficult, but Thacker Pass is probably the most advanced project that's out there.
Very interesting. That's so cool. I love learning about stuff like that to get all the details about the various types of lithium and the geology. Let's also talk about rare earths, because this is a subset of the commodity sector that doesn't get a lot of press, but is nonetheless very important. So could you talk to us about the main macro drivers for rare earths, and specifically the heavy rare earths you're exploring for, and how that differs from other rare earths?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, you're right. Rare earths do not get the loving that they deserve. Governments really understand. So defense departments, transportation departments, they really understand. But I think that the issue with rare earths is they're just a little bit more removed compared to lithium. We all know that lithium goes into our Teslas or our Audis or our Kias or whatever it is, and but it's the rare earths are a couple more steps involved, because the rare earths go into the the permanent magnets that go into motors that go into your EV. So there's really four rare earths that are really of interest that go into these magnets. There's the light rare earths, which is neodymium and praseodymium, and you need to have that in pretty much all the magnets that go into these motors. The heavies, they're not used quite as commonly, but they are used in some types of motors. So, for example, Tesla will use only light rare earth magnets in the front of the car, and then in the back they'll use heavies as well. And the reason is because they have higher operating temperatures for these magnets before they lose magnetism when you add terbium and dysprosium into these magnets. And the interesting thing is that, these four rare earths, they make up 94% of the value of the rare earth market. So, and what's nice about GEMI is that, and what sets it apart is that even though we have neodymium and praseodymium, we also have the terbium and dysprosium that a lot of other projects don't have. Now, if we kind of look at some of the macro drivers, the number one is probably geopolitical. And again, it's China versus the Western world. And in this case here, China is absolutely dominant. So, for example, China they mine 100% of the world's heavy rare earths. There's no other place that mines heavy rare earths. You have no choice. It doesn't matter whether you live in the United States, Canada, Australia. You must buy your heavy rare earths from China, or products with heavy rare earths. But overall, China accounts for 60% of the global rare earths mined. While Saudi is well endowed in oil, for example, China is just well endowed in rare earths that are easy to extract. They're called ionic rare earths. They're in clays. But then they've done a wonderful job of just, nurturing and growing the whole supply chain. So they actually, they control 85% of the processing capacity and over 90% of the permanent magnets as well that are manufactured there. So they've done an extremely effective job of developing that supply chain and then also protecting it through tariffs and taxes and so on. Now, we all know that there's this deterioration of international relations that between China and many other countries. And I touched on it a little bit, and the spy balloon thing. Well, that actually, when the Americans shot it down over the East Coast, the Chinese responded by saying, okay, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, you're now cut off. You don't get any rare earths from us, or you don't get magnets from us. They'll find other places for it, but it's more symbolic. But what it comes down to is that it looks like they're starting to weaponize rare earths again. They did that in 2010 with Japan, and when that happened, prices went parabolic. I mean, if you look on a spot price for rare earths, you'll see this huge spike around 2011, 2010, 2011, 2012. So they have been known to do it in the past, and there is worry that they might do it again.
Very comprehensive breakdown of the rare earth sector, so thank you for that. I'd like to dive into Monumental Minerals now, and maybe for those unfamiliar with the company, you could give us an overview.
Of course. So, Monumental is composed of three projects. Two of them are lithium brine in the lithium triangle. And that's Turi and Laguna Blanca. Now, these are both Turi and Laguna Blanca are option agreements with Lithium Chile. As I mentioned earlier, we have a very good working relationship with Lithium Chile, and in fact, Michelle DeSecco who's their chief operating officer, is one of our board members. And then we have the rare earth project in Mexico, and this is in northern Mexico in Coahuila State. It's actually about 30 miles from the Texas border. So if anybody knows Texas quite well, it's very close to Big Bend National Park, which is a beautiful part of the state. And the projects we have are really related to this energy transition towards electrification, and that's kind of the thesis of the company, that the world is moving away from ICE vehicles, and they're moving towards this electrification. And it's largely EVs, but it's also could be water pumps, where you need rare earths. It could be wind turbines where you need rare earths, and so on and so forth. And we've also seen that, in the past couple of years, a lot of auto manufacturers or OEMs are taking positions in lithium projects or rare earth projects. And so we see that Monumental is having two of the key things that are needed to build EVs or needed to advance this global electrification. So that's kind of the company as an overview and the kind of the overall company thesis, I would say.
Well, your focus, as you mentioned, is on 2 lithium brine properties in Chile. So maybe let's hone in on that. And if you could give us some further details on those projects and let us know where you are in your activities at both of them.
Of course. So I'll talk about Turi first, Salar de Turi. It's about 80 kilometers to the northeast from the city of Calama. And the city of Calama is known for a very large open pit copper mine that Codelco operates. And things are moving well with planning. We're ticking off those boxes related to community, to environment, logistics, and just kind of trying to get all of our ducks in a row and ready for drilling. So specifically the option agreement with Lithium Chile for this project is to earn in 50.01% ownership over 2 years with a 1.4 million Canadian spend and a 700,000 Canadian in cash. And the decision to pick up this project, so we picked up this project in October of 2022, and the decision was really based on public data that we had to look at through just assessment of information that Lithium Chile provided for us. And we really saw that there's a compelling technical story there. So we saw very good surface brine numbers and really good looking TEM geophysics. So it was it was a pretty easy decision to make. And in the terms of the agreement, we're very good as well, very favorable. And the other project that we have, so that's Laguna Blanca, and it's about 120 kilometers due east of the community of San Pedro de Atacama. So it's actually not that far from the Bolivian border. Actually, it's almost right on the Bolivian border, and but it's in a different geological setting. It's at 4,500 meters of altitude, which is not always so much fun, especially if you've had one too many gin and tonics the night before. But the planning is also coming along well for that. And again, it's all about first and foremost community and environment, and then logistics and permits and getting all of these ducks in a row. So it's coming along well. And for this project, we can earn in 75% ownership over 3 years with 1.5 million Canadian spend and 1.5 million in cash. So again, pretty favorable, very favorable terms for 75% ownership. And then I should also mention that we increased the size of this project quite significantly about 6 months ago. And so this was, doing some good geology, some good assessments of the salar, and then also thinking outside the box a little bit. So we use some free satellite, remote sensing satellite data to kind of estimate where lithium salts might be elevated at surface. But the beauty of this now is that we control the entire salar. So we have on the Chilean side, and that's really beneficial because there's no one else that can come in near us.
Well, let's talk about the rare earth project in Mexico now. Could you shed some more light on that project for us?
First, so at this point, we've done a lot of geological modeling. So modeling based on a lot of mapping that was done, a lot of geochemistry, geophysics. It's just very complicated geologically speaking. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that we really understood the system before we started spending the big dollars putting holes in the ground. So we didn't want to be drilling based on luck. We wanted to be drilling based on real data and real information. So the project itself is really, really interesting. And the way that I explain this, the formation of these minerals is almost like the foam on top of a glass of beer, if you can think about it that way. So you have this magma, and it's kind of coming up higher, getting closer to the surface. And as it moves up, then certain things crystallize out. So certain minerals crystallize out. But rare earths don't like to fit into those mineral structures very well. So they kind of get excluded. And then you go higher, they're still excluded. Higher, they're still excluded. To the point where you're so close to the surface, they're like, well, I got to go into something. So I'm just going to go into these really weird minerals with really weird names and chemical formulas that are this long. And so that's kind of what we think we have. So these are the last things to basically the last gasp, or the foam on top of the beer. And so similar to projects like Tanbreez in Greenland, or Norra Kärr in Sweden, or Mount Saint Hilaire in Quebec. So at the point we're at now, because we have basically de-risked it to the point where we just need to drill, we're going to get drilling at towards the end of June, so towards the end of next month. We have 6 targets chosen for an initial program for a total of 1,800 meters, so about 300 meters per hole. And we just really want to define what we see at the surface, because we see a lot of mineralized rocks, we see a lot of mineralized veins, and we just need to find where that source is. So I'm really excited about this project, and I'm really excited about drilling it. But I'll also mention there's other reasons why we really like it other than the technical. And a lot of that has to do with location. So rare earths are a bit like real estate. It's all about location. And, the fact that we are so close to Texas, which is a fast developing hub for the Americas for the rare earth industry, that's a major one. So we're only about a 6 or 8 hour drive from San Antonio, if you're to drive there. And to just give you some examples, right now there will be the processing of rare earth ore from Mount Weld. So that's in Australia. And that'll be done at Blue Line Corp in Hondo, Texas, which is basically San Antonio. You've got a deal between MP Materials and GM in Fort Worth. Of course, the big one is the Texas Gigafactory in Austin. So there is becoming this critical mass of rare earth processing and manufacturing. But in addition to that, we really like Mexico because you've got a skilled workforce. There's a lack of heavy rare earth deposits basically anywhere in the world. And we're not remote. We're close to stuff. And lastly, if I kind of revert back to the discussions on geopolitics, is that we are in a friendly jurisdiction that's part of the North American Free Trade Agreement, or whatever it's called now.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jamil, for shedding light on lithium, rare earths, and Monumental Minerals. I'll put a link in the description below to the website and social media profiles of Monumental Minerals for people who want to check that out. Before I let you go, any final words you want to share about the company?
Just some goals that we have for 2023, and that's, as I was saying, drilling at the Gemi project, the rare earth project, and drilling of Laguna Blanca. We only have a set amount of money. We rely on shareholders to fund our projects, as do many juniors, and so we can't do it all at once. So we've chosen one rare earth, which is Gemi, and one lithium project to drill, and that is Laguna Blanca. So our plan is to get those off the ground and to get the drills turning as soon as possible. And then lastly, any good exploration company will always have a pipeline of projects. You always need to have a pipeline there so that you can very quickly pivot or move to the next project if need be. And so we always have a budget and for project generation, and we have some very interesting very early stage exploration projects as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you once again for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge with our audience.
Well, thank you very much, Jesse. I really appreciate it.
Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.